If you find yourself apologizing for their secrets at 2 a.m., you aren't paranoid. You are being gaslighted. Stop asking if you are crazy and start asking why your intuition is screaming at you to run. That was me 6 months ago, and what I found that night was not just evidence of betrayal. It was something far more disturbing. I found a pattern of him accusing me of the exact things he was doing. And in the next few minutes, I am going to walk you through how I finally recognized what was happening, how this weapon works against you, and most importantly, how I stopped letting his reality become mine. Because here is what nobody tells you about this kind of manipulation. The worst part is not the lies. It is when you start to believe that you are the liar. It started small, so small I almost missed it. We had been together for about 8 months when he came home one evening and asked me, very casually, if I had been talking to my ex. I had not. I had not spoken to my ex in over 2 years, but he did not laugh. He just looked at me with this expression I had never seen before, cold, suspicious, like he was studying me for cracks in my story. I just feel like you are hiding something from me, he said. I feel like you are not being honest. I felt my stomach drop, not because I was guilty, but because I realized in that moment that no matter what I said, he had already decided I was lying. And that feeling stayed with me for days. I started checking my phone more carefully. I started rehearsing conversations in my head before I had them with him. I started feeling guilty, even though I had not done anything wrong. That is how it begins, with a seed of doubt planted so carefully that you do not even notice it is growing. But the accusations did not stop there. In fact, they were about to get much worse. A few weeks later, he accused me of flirting with a coworker. We had gone to a work event together, and I had had a normal, professional conversation with a colleague I had known for years. The next morning, he woke me up and told me he could not sleep all night because of how I had thrown myself at this man. I was stunned. I had barely even spoken to this coworker for more than 5 minutes, but he was relentless. He told me I'd touched this man's arm, that I had laughed too hard at his jokes, that I had leaned in too close. I started to question myself. Had I leaned in? Was I laughing too much? Maybe I had been inappropriate without realizing it. I apologized. I actually apologized for something I was not even sure I had done. I just need to know you are committed to us, he said. I need to know I can trust you. I promised him he could. I promised him I would do better. Looking back now, I want to reach through time and shake myself. He is the one who cannot be trusted, but I did not know that yet. I was still trying to be the perfect partner for someone who was using my empathy as a weapon. And here is where things started to escalate in ways I never saw coming. The accusations kept coming. I was suspicious. I was secretive. I was probably cheating. He started checking my location constantly. If I said I was at the grocery store and my phone showed me at a gas station 2 blocks away, he would call me immediately. I would explain. I stopped for gas. I ran another errand. And each time, my explanations felt weaker, like I was the one on trial for crimes I did not commit. He would go through my phone when I was in the shower. I would come out and find him scrolling through my messages with this tight, angry expression. I started leaving my phone unlocked all the time. I gave him all my passwords. I stopped texting male friends entirely because it was not worth the interrogation. I was shrinking myself, bit by bit, trying to prove I was not this deceitful, untrustworthy person he kept accusing me of being. And the whole time, a small voice in the back of my mind kept whispering, something is wrong. Then came the night that changed everything. I was not planning to go through his phone. I had never done anything like that before, but I could not sleep. I was lying next to him, and that voice in my head would not stop. The voice that said, "You are not crazy. Something is wrong." So I did it. I picked up his phone, and what I found made my hands shake so badly I almost dropped the phone. Messages, so many messages, to a woman from his office, flirty messages, intimate messages, plans to meet up when he had told me he was working late, photos he had sent her, photos she had sent him. I scrolled back through weeks of conversations, and then I saw it, the thing that made everything click into place. He was telling her the same things he had been accusing me of. He was telling her that I was suspicious and jealous, that I was always checking his phone, that I was probably cheating on him. I sat there in the dark, reading his words, and I felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak, not even anger, just this cold, clear recognition. He had been accusing me of cheating because he was the one cheating. He had been calling me suspicious because he was the one with secrets. He had been making me feel crazy because he needed me to doubt my own reality. Every accusation had been a confession. And once I understood that pattern, I started seeing it everywhere. I want to pause here because understanding this pattern probably saved my sanity. What I was experiencing feels like someone takes all their own guilt, all their own lies, all their own shame, and they hand it to you wrapped in an accusation. And if you are empathetic, you take it. You accept responsibility for problems that were never yours. By constantly accusing me of being untrustworthy, he kept me on the defensive. I was so busy trying to prove my innocence that I never thought to question his. Here is what makes this particularly harmful. The person doing this genuinely believes their problems are caused by everyone else, by you, never by their own choices. They have built this perfect image of themselves, and underneath is a version they cannot stand to look at. So they take everything they hate about themselves and project it onto you. I was his dumping ground. Every lie he told, every betrayal he committed, he wrapped it up and handed it to me. That is what this does. It turns you into a mirror for someone else's guilt. But I was not about to stay silent anymore. The morning after I found the messages, I did not confront him immediately. I needed time to think, so I went to work. I sat at my desk and made a list, every accusation he had ever made, and next to each one, I wrote down what I now suspected he had been doing. The correlation was perfect. When he accused me of talking to my ex, he had reconnected with his. When he accused me of flirting at that work event, he was in the middle of his affair. When he said I was being secretive, he had just deleted messages. Every single accusation was him confessing. I just did not have the vocabulary to understand what I was hearing. And when I finally confronted him, his response was textbook manipulation. That evening, I confronted him. I told him I had seen the messages, and I watched as he tried every manipulation technique in his arsenal. First, he denied it. Those messages did not mean anything. I was misinterpreting. This was just proof of my jealousy and paranoia. When denial did not work, he got angry. How dare I go through his phone? I was controlling. I was the abusive one. When anger did not work, he crumbled. He started crying, real tears, telling me he was sorry, that he loved me, that he would end things with her. And here's what I realized. He was not sorry for betraying me. He was sorry for getting caught. He had spent months making me feel small and guilty and crazy. But the moment I held up evidence of his wrongdoing, he flipped instantly into the misunderstood victim. And I felt it. That pull to comfort him. That is how well he had trained me. But this time, I did not give in, because I finally understood something crucial about people like this. The moment when you finally see the pattern clearly is not a relief, not at first. It is terrifying. Because once you understand what is happening, you have to accept that the person you have been loving does not actually see you as a real person. In their mind, they are interacting with an idea of you, a static version they created in their head. And when your actual behavior does not match that idea, they feel threatened. That is when the punishment starts. Days of silent treatment for disagreeing about something small. Rage for offering gentle feedback. I had been confused for months about why he seemed to despise me for things that normal couples handle easily. It was because the real me was too threatening. So he had to reshape me, break me down, make me smaller. So I made a decision that probably saved my life. I moved out 2 weeks later. I did not give him another chance. I did not agree to couples therapy. I did not believe his promises to change, not because I am unforgiving, but because I finally understood something crucial. His way of being was not a series of bad choices that therapy could fix. It was a rigid structure designed to protect him from ever having to look at himself honestly. He genuinely believed all his problems were caused by external factors, never by his own behavior. You cannot change something you do not believe is broken. I had spent months trying to love him into self-awareness. I had this fantasy that if I just loved him correctly enough, he would transform. But that person did not exist. The real him was exactly who he had been showing me all along. But leaving was only the beginning of my recovery. The first few weeks after I left were strange. I kept waiting for the relief to hit. Instead, I felt lost, like I did not know who I was anymore. Because here is what this pattern does. It makes you internalize the accusations. You start to believe that maybe you are suspicious. Maybe you are the problem. I had spent so long defending myself that I had stopped knowing where his voice ended and mine began. And now I had to figure out how to give it all back. I started keeping a journal. Every day I would write down things that happened and how I felt, just to anchor myself in my own reality. Because one of the most damaging effects of being with someone like this is how they make you question whether events even happened. They rewrite history. The journal helped. Seeing my own words written down gave me something solid to hold on to. I also started reaching out to friends I had distanced myself from during the relationship. And you know what I discovered? They had seen it. They had noticed me getting smaller, quieter, more anxious. Having their outside perspective was crucial. You need people who can reflect back to you who you actually are. That is what connection does. It breaks the spell. But there was one emotion that almost pulled me back in. I want to address something I struggled with for months after I left. The guilt. I felt guilty for going through his phone. I felt guilty for not trying harder. And I need you to hear this. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. Yes, people who do this are often formed through childhood trauma. Yes, there is probably a scared, wounded part of them underneath, but none of that is your responsibility to fix. You cannot love someone into wholeness. You cannot prove your trustworthiness to someone who needs to believe you are untrustworthy. The guilt I felt was not about my actions. It was about the fact that I'd been conditioned to prioritize his feelings over my own reality. Letting go of that guilt was one of the hardest things I have ever done. But it was also the moment I started to get myself back. And that is when I learned the most important lesson of all. Here is what I wish someone had told me early on. When someone constantly accuses you of lying, they are probably the liar. When someone constantly questions your loyalty, they are probably the one being disloyal. When someone makes you feel crazy for trusting your instincts are probably right. This pattern is not subtle once you know what to look for. And the moment you see it clearly, you have a choice. You can stay and continue to be the dumping ground for someone else's shame. Or you can accept a really difficult truth. The person you are with will not change, because change requires looking inward, and their entire psychological structure is designed to prevent that. That is what acceptance means. You stop wasting your energy on the fantasy that things will be different. The game is rigged. The only way to win is to stop playing. So let me give you the exact steps I took to protect myself. Now, I want to shift into what you actually do if you recognize yourself in this story. First, you need to stop engaging with the accusations. Every instinct wants you to defend yourself, to prove you are innocent. But the accusations are not actually about you. They are about their need to avoid looking at their own behavior. When you defend yourself, you're giving them your emotional energy. That energy is what they are really after. They need it to regulate their unstable self-esteem. So you have to cut off the supply. You have to make yourself uninteresting, as boring and unreactive as a gray rock. When they accuse you of something, you do not explain. You just say something neutral. Okay, I see. It feels wrong at first, but you are just refusing to play a game designed for you to lose. Without your emotional reaction, they lose interest. And here is the second strategy that changed everything for me. Second, you need to stop sharing your inner world with them. With someone like this, your vulnerabilities become weapons. Every dream you share, every fear you confess, they file it away. And later, they pull it out and use it against you. Think of it as creating a firewall. You stop going to them first with good news or bad news. You stick to neutral topics, good, bad, and indifferent. And with someone like this, you only discuss the indifferent. Third, you need to document everything. Keep a journal, save text messages, take screenshots, because this type of manipulation works by making you doubt your own memory. Your journal becomes your anchor, your proof that you're not crazy. I cannot tell you how many times I went back to my journal in those early weeks because he was still calling, still trying to reel me back in. And my journal said, "This is what really happened. This is why you left." That documentation saved me from going back. But documentation alone is not enough. You need boundaries. Fourth, you need to set boundaries and actually enforce them, not flexible guidelines. Actual, concrete, non-negotiable boundaries. And when they violate those boundaries, you have to follow through with consequences every time. People like this test boundaries constantly. If you set a boundary and do not enforce it, you have taught them that your boundaries are meaningless. I learned this when I told him I would not respond to messages after 9 at night. The first night I set that boundary, he texted me at midnight, then at 1 in the morning. Then he called repeatedly. The next day, he told me I was cruel. I almost caved. Almost. But instead, I reminded him of the boundary, and I stuck to it. It took about 2 weeks before he stopped testing that boundary, not because he respected it, but because he realized it was not a weak spot he could exploit. And finally, the most crucial step of all. Fifth, you need to build a support network outside the relationship. Friends, family, a therapist, people who can reflect back to you what reality actually looks like. Because isolation is one of the most powerful tools in this type of manipulation. I was lucky. I had friends who refused to let me drift away. They would check in. They would remind me of who I was before him. After I left, those friends became my lifeline. They just held space for me while I put myself back together. You cannot do this alone. You need people who can remind you of your worth. Here is something else nobody talks about. The aftermath of leaving someone like this is a complete dismantling of your sense of reality. For months, I would wake up and think, did I overreact? Maybe I was the problem. That is the residue. Even after you have left, the accusations stick to you. I had to actively work to separate his voice from my own, to remind myself that I am not suspicious, I'm not jealous, I'm not untrustworthy. Those were his traits, his shame that he could not hold, so he handed it to me. It is a process, a daily practice of reclaiming your own mind. So here is what I need you to understand right now. I want to end with this. If you are in a relationship where you are constantly being accused of things you are not doing, where you feel like you are always defending yourself, where you are starting to doubt your own sanity, please listen. You are not crazy. You are not paranoid. You are not imagining this. You are being systematically manipulated by someone who needs you to be the villain so they never have to confront their own behavior. And that is not love. Love does not make you smaller. It does not make you constantly question yourself. Real love sees you clearly, all of you, the messy, imperfect, evolving human being that you are. You deserve better. You deserve a relationship where you are not constantly on trial, where you can trust your own perceptions. Getting out is not easy. It requires accepting some really painful truths, but staying costs more. It costs your sanity, your sense of self, your ability to trust your own mind. The game is rigged. The accusations will never stop. You cannot prove yourself innocent to someone who needs you to be guilty. The only way to save yourself is to get up from the table, walk away, and start rebuilding your life based on your own reality. It has been 8 months since I left, 8 months of therapy and journaling and learning to trust myself again. The person I was in that relationship, constantly defending herself and shrinking herself, that person is gone. I am still figuring out who I am without those accusations shaping me. I am still learning to take up space again, to trust my instincts, but I am free, and that is worth more than any amount of love from someone who could only see me through the distorted lens of their own unacknowledged shame. You can be free too. You just have to be willing to stop playing a game you were never meant to win. And here is what I want you to do right now. If this story resonated with you, write down one accusation that has been thrown at you repeatedly. Just one. And then ask yourself, honestly, is this actually describing me? Or is this describing the person making the accusation? That is where it starts, with one question, one moment of clarity, one decision to trust yourself. You are not the problem. You never were. And the moment you truly believe that, everything changes. If this video helped you see something clearly for the first time, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories like this coming, more patterns to recognize, more tools to help you reclaim your reality. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this with them. You deserve a relationship where you are seen, valued, and trusted, where love does not require you to shrink. And if that is not what you have right now, you have permission to walk away. You have permission to choose yourself. I am rooting for you, and I will see you in the next one.